Hi, I'm Corey Deacon, one of the founders of Nirvana Health. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to check out our YouTube channel. If you struggle to find a lasting way to feel better and want to achieve the health you deserve, reach out to us and we'll figure out how to get you the help you need. We've helped clients from all over the world get to the root cause of their condition and find a long-lasting way to feel better. To take the first step, go to nirvanahealth.com/go and book a 30-minute consultation with one of our healthcare advisors. I look forward to getting to know you. Why do drugs not work well for depression? So, in my opinion, I think drugs can work well for depression. But what I've found in most of the people that we work with is it doesn't work well long term. And if you look at a lot of patents on these medications, they were actually never meant to be prescribed long term. They work very well short term to get things under control and balanced, make you feel well, so that we can figure out what's going on, what's causing this, what's driving it, right? This, again, it doesn't happen for no reason. It happens, it's different in every individual, which makes it complicated, but there are reasons, okay? Now, the other problem with medications is trying to come off of them, okay? A lot of medications, especially the stimulating antidepressants, can be very difficult to come off of if you want to, because what ends up happening is they create this sense of kind of dependency, and when you try to come off of them, your neurotransmitter systems haven't reset and it takes them some time. It's kind of like being hungover, right? It takes your neurotransmitters some time to build back up to feel good again. So this is another problem I see with drugs, is without support, it can be really hard, if not impossible, for people to get off of them. Now, the other thing are the side effects, right? We can get nauseous, we can get digestive complaints, we can get low energy and fatigue is very common. Then we get cognitive complaints, cognitive problems, memory issues, focus issues. We end up with issues with dizziness, with ringing in the ears, with low libido, and all of these problems add up to create problems with relationships, problems with living life to the fullest. So these are kind of some of the problems where I see if drugs do work, you start getting these side effects from them as well that aren't very pleasant. Okay. Now, one of the main reasons that I see these drugs not work long term, and for a lot of people not work at all, is we're still operating under the theory that depression is caused by serotonin issues. Okay? And we've actually disproven that in research since the early 90s. But we still operate based on these principles that serotonin is the reason, right? Now, it may be the reason for some people, and it may be indirectly the reason, as we talked about in the inflammation video. If there's inflammation, yeah, your serotonin levels drop. So by tricking your brain into thinking it has more serotonin is going to help, but it's only going to help for a certain amount of time, right? Some of these antidepressants are anti-inflammatory, so in that case, yeah, probably going to help, but we still need to figure out what's causing it. So this is why I see drugs fail, is we see 8 different subtypes of issues in the brain that lead to depression. So we say 8 subtypes of depression. The first one is immunotoxic. Okay, these are toxins that come into the system and overstimulate the immune system. The mercury, lead, cadmium, other heavy metals, environmental toxicants from exhaust fumes, from plastics, from other environmental toxins like pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, mycotoxins, right? Mold toxins, very common. 25% of people have weaknesses where they store them in the body and the nervous system rather than clearing them, and they don't even need to live in an overly moldy environment, right? So all of these are cumulative. So what we'll say is if you have a little bit of lead and a little bit of mercury, it will add up to 4 times stimulation rather than just 2. You add another little bit of mycotoxins, now you're at 8 times. So it's an amplifying effect on the immune system. When that happens, of course, it's going to disrupt our brain's ability to adapt and build new pathways. The glial cells of the brain, which are the electricians or the power linemen of the brain, they're what allow us to build new pathways and rewire things. All of a sudden, they're paying more attention to the immune system stimulation than they are to actually building new pathways. and that starts leading us to symptoms like depression. Okay. The second subtype is gut. Okay. The gut, if it is not functioning properly, if we're not digesting things properly, if we're not breaking down proteins, if we're not breaking down microbes, if our probiotic levels are out of whack, if our motility is poor, so we're not moving things through the gut properly, now all of a sudden we get a similar immune stimulation that you get from immunotoxins at the level of the gut, right? So now things that we're eating are becoming a problem, things that we're drinking are becoming a problem. Every time we eat, we get an amplification of inflammation. That leads to, again, the tryptophan not turning to serotonin, not turning to melatonin, we're not sleeping, inflammation continues to rise. So without cleaning up that gut and having good gut function, we're not going to be able to break through depression symptoms no matter how much we medicate ourselves. And I've seen it time and time again. The third subtype is nutritional. Right? This nutritional is fairly commonly known to people. Nutrition is related to nutritional deficiencies. So if we have deficiencies in vitamin B6, we can't build dopamine, we can't build serotonin, and we can't build GABA. Okay, these are neurotransmitters. If we're deficient in magnesium, we get too much stimulation of something called glutamate in our brain. It's what happens after we get a head injury as well. So that can also start driving symptoms of depression and anxiety. Right? If we are low in zinc, we can't pull heavy metals out of the body. If we're low in vitamin B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, acetyl L-carnitine, which is an amino acid, we can't get our fats and our sugars into the energy cycle well, and we get a metabolic problem or a metabolic type of depression. So we can't produce the energy that our brain needs to actually be happy and engaging, right? We actually, a lot of people who have been diagnosed with depression actually just have mental fatigue, severe mental fatigue, and they're not able to get the resources to be able to re-engage their emotional area as well. So it's a very important one, the nutritional metabolic. We need to have the certain amount of energy for our brain to function properly. It's quite energy hungry little organism. And we also need to have a lot of our vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and fatty acids all in range. If you have poor counts of omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, you're going to have trouble with depression and controlling inflammation. If you can't regulate vitamin D properly, you can also get problems with depression because of how vitamin D works on what we call the scaffolding of the brain. It's like the building of the scaffold so we can build new pathways. It also balances the immune system out. So a lot of these nutritional issues can drive problems with depression as well. Okay. The fourth type is hormonal. Hormonal imbalances very commonly can drive depression. Okay, this includes our sex hormones like progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, cortisol, corticosterone, estrogen. We have 3 types of estrogen: estriol, estradiol, and estrone. Testosterone. Any imbalances in the sex or steroid hormones can cause issues. Now you can also get issues when your thyroid hormone isn't balanced properly, and we actually live in an epidemic of low thyroid, and a lot of it is subclinical, which means it's not severe enough to be flagged as a clinical diagnosis by a doctor, but it's low enough that it's causing you symptoms, and a lot of people are getting a metabolic type of depression from their thyroid not being in perfect shape. Now, the other hormones that can be affected are pituitary and hypothalamus hormones. So we have a really important hormone that gets released from the pituitary called melanocyte stimulating hormone, MSH. It's what allows us to tan. So when our eyes or our skin are exposed to UV light, MSH gets released. And it actually regulates all of our steroid hormones, our immune system at our gut. It regulates our melatonin so we can sleep. It regulates our serotonin, regulates our dopamine so we can feel good, rewarded, and we can have good cognitive function. It regulates our acetylcholine so that we can get good memory function. And it regulates our mucosal immune system. So just having low levels of this can cause a massive cascade of effects that needs to be regulated at the level of the brain. And there's a lot of different ways to assess and regulate this. Okay. The fifth subtype is neurotransmitters, and these are the classical hormones of the brain, I like to call them. They're the chemicals that get released from our brain cells that tell our other cells and other brain cells what to do. So you've probably heard of a lot of them. Serotonin, of course, is the kind of happy, calm sleep neurotransmitter. Dopamine is another main one for focus, pleasure, reward. Acetylcholine, more for memory. GABA, more for calming. Glutamate, for exciting the brain. It's really important that we have a good balance between glutamate and GABA. We have glycine, we have histamine, which most people know of as allergic reactions. Histamine also works in the brain. So we have all these different neurotransmitters, and again, just like hormones, they're like a symphony. If they're not all in balance, we can start getting symptoms. So it doesn't necessarily need to be serotonin that's out of balance. I've actually seen people be depressed from having too much serotonin, right? And this can be tested in a urine test to determine where levels are at. But it's very important that these are all balanced, and any of them can go out, and any of them can cause depression. Okay. The sixth subtype are communication issues, network issues. So when our brain's not communicating properly, whether it was from old head injuries, whether it's from toxic disturbances, whether it's just from wear and tear on the brain, which does happen, now all of a sudden the areas of the brain can't communicate properly. One area of the brain might be yelling, another one's whispering. One area of the brain's speaking Russian, another area is speaking French. And they can't interconnect properly, and all of a sudden your brain starts getting tired because it's spending more energy trying to function properly. And if you have certain regions not communicating well, depression is a symptom of it. This is best analyzed through a quantitative EEG to see how things are communicating or miscommunicating, so that we can actually figure out how we train it back into a proper state. The seventh is the emotional limbic system subtype. I have a whole video on this talking about how the limbic system functions. But if it is hijacking areas of the brain here, here, or here, you're going to have a high likelihood of being depressed. Okay. On the other side of that, the limbic system also has the ability to dissociate, which means we don't get good emotional stimulation sent out to the outer part of the cortex. So we can become kind of emotionless. And this can also happen from using serotonin-related drugs. We become emotionless. It's like our emotions aren't even making their way up to the surface. And we're just kind of numb. And a lot of people will tell me that that's how they feel. They just feel like, oh, whatever, like, well, what's the point of life? I don't feel anything, right? So that's very important to have that system balanced. You don't want it to be too active, but you don't want it to be too underactive as well. The last subtype is something called purpose. Okay, a lot of times everything else looks good, but somebody is not aligned with their purpose. They're doing something that makes them feel purposeless. They know what they want to do with their life. They know what they should be doing, and they're not doing it. And a lot of times the underlying other 7 subtypes keep us from connecting to our purpose through fear, especially the 7th one, the emotional limbic subtype. So filling in the voids of those subtypes and then connecting with your purpose and doing things you value, right? That is the most important thing, because if we're devaluing ourselves, we're doing something that we don't love, then our purpose is completely removed, and it creates stress, and it can actually drive us to a state of depression over time. So it's very important that you look at all those different levels, because they all can be affecting you and driving depression. Obviously, the more you have, the worse it's going to be. So is it something you have to live with? No, absolutely not. If you can figure out all the reasons why it may be happening, fill them in, fix them, resolve them, and then learn strategies to move forward, you can absolutely reverse, in my opinion, any types of depression. But a lot of it comes back to long-term commitments to change. And one of the best things that you can do to see what is actually, if you're dealing with any of these types of issues I've mentioned, is get a quantitative EEG. It is a functional brain map, a functional brain image that will show you how things are functioning. Okay? There's not a lot of difference in structure. You have to look very closely. You're not going to be able to get your doctor to look at an MRI close enough to be able to tell if there's a structural abnormality, right? Most of the time it's these other issues, and a quantitative EEG brain map will show you all of the ones you're dealing with, because that is the reality. Is there's oftentimes multiple subtypes, which is what makes it difficult. It's what makes treatment difficult. It's what makes changing your diet and not seeing any changes difficult. You really have to bring everything into account. And what we've found is by looking at a brain map, you can see all of the different subtypes you're dealing with and then exactly how you need to approach them. Okay. If you guys have any questions about that, reach out to us, book a complimentary phone call. We can help you figure out what these subtypes are and what's driving your depression so you can break through a bit. You don't need to live with it. Okay. I hope I answered some questions you had on depression, and I hope the subtypes made sense. Thanks so much for listening.